small amounts. We're into the shake and bake that's so portable it's scary. And now, as you mentioned, Will, the police in Colorado are indicating that a lot of it is coming in liquid meth because of the difficulty to detect and being crystallized once it's brought to Colorado. So the bottom line is, despite all our efforts, despite our successes in educating the public, it's a very inexpensive drug, relatively speaking, right now. It's very plentiful, and we have a young population that they're out to turn into meth addicts.
Did it surprise you how quickly they adapted, the drug suppliers? I mean, it's scary.
It really is, but I've had experience with that marketplace and how flexible it is and how quickly they can meet changing demands and create demands.
And Jeff, you mentioned you had something to add.
You know, the Senate sponsored a Senate town hall meeting on methamphetamine use, and I was on the panel for that. And also involved with that were four recovering meth addicts from about as diverse socioeconomic backgrounds as you can imagine. You know, the whole spectrum of things. Very different, but what was the same for every one of them was basically, you know, I thought I would try this stuff, and, you know, 2 months later I was in prison, or 6 months later I lost my family and my house, or that story was the same for everybody. For the person who was very affluent or the person who was a street person, it didn't matter. This stuff takes you over so fast. And another thing just about the cost that we don't even think about is, you know, it's like if you did an intervention on your alcoholic dad, when they go to treatment, you just go and pour all the alcohol down the drain. With meth, you got to bring in a hazmat team.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, you talked about the cost, and you know, you also mentioned that meth really doesn't discriminate. You know, it affects people of all walks of life. It doesn't matter what you do, where you're from. People from every income level, every socioeconomic level are doing this drug, a $1.4 billion problem here in our state. And Kent, the Colorado Meth Project, trying to fight this. Can you tell us about it and what you're doing?
Sure, and I think that's a great point in terms of how we need to educate, and this is a really large-scale statewide prevention program really that combines a public messaging campaign with community outreach and work and outreach into the schools to educate that teen population. Primarily, we talked about the age that people first use, Mayor Hancock referenced that, and the importance of getting that education out there early because it does not discriminate, as points just been made. I think that's really important, that there is not just a certain population that needs to get this education and learn the facts about the drugs. So we're trying to get those facts into young people's hands before they ever have the opportunity to try it. So we launched the campaign here in May of 2009, mentioned the contents of it, but last year, about this time last year, we launched a new digital campaign that included the launch of a national website called methproject.org. And this site is one that answers 26 of the most frequently asked questions about the drug and really gives teens the opportunity to interact and engage with the facts about methamphetamine. The campaign, our public messaging campaign, that then has been designed to drive people to this site, drive teens to this site, has become more and more targeted to reach that young adult and teen population. And really, it's a unique resource that's out there. It's got extensive input from teens in terms of the way that it's put together, both from the questions and the content, but it's very highly factually accurate. And there's 350 pieces of content on there. We actually have on the screens an example. We're going to show you one of those pieces, which is how we answer the question about what does meth do to the body. So if you're looking at this on the monitors, you'll see there's 6 different ways to answer the question down at the bottom, and those include scientific facts. They might be personal stories from people, teens who have actually used the drug, and also some interactive games and content that can help engage teens. And we're going to show you one of those. This is Body by Meth, and it's sort of a takeoff on the old Operation game that I think we probably all remember from being kids. So let's take, for example, let's pull out the tooth. So we're going to pull the tooth out, drop it in the tray there, and what comes up is a fact that says using meth can lead to rotting teeth and gums from poor hygiene, bacteria, grinding, and the acidity of the drug. These are some of the important things that come up when you're talking with teens who care about their appearance. Let's also pull out the bug. So if we grab the bug and drop it in, it says Meth users often hallucinate that bugs are crawling under their skin and try to dig them out, leaving open sores. And research shows that as many as 2/3 of meth users at some time or another, Jeff referenced this earlier, experience some kind of psychosis, which can begin even in the very first months of use. So this site has been great for our campaign. The people in Colorado have really embraced it over the last year. More than 7 million video views related to this campaign have happened here in Colorado. 1 million audio stories have been played during the last year, and over 140,000 young people have gone to this site and consumed multiple pieces of this kind of content that you're seeing. And these are really great indicators that we're seeing that teens are getting that message and finding out the dangers about the drug.
Do you think that kids are more afraid of just what they're going to look like if they abuse this drug, or do they comprehend the lifelong consequences, the family consequences as well? What's most effective?
I think you sometimes have to start with the part you mentioned first, Will, where you're really starting with the issue of what does this mean to me and what's it going to make me look like? And that's really where the evolution of our campaign, if you followed it over the last 3 years, is gone, where we really started talking about what's going to happen to the individual, what happens to me physically, mentally, emotionally. But then we really start to shift that to talking about the larger impact of the people that get affected by it, that they care most about. And that's really, we'll talk a little bit more about that probably too, of how that's important in the whole ability to take action around the drug and the issue.
Jeff, you heard Tanya mention how she lost 25 pounds in 2 weeks on this drug. So we know how quickly this drug acts. That's not healthy, folks, to lose that kind of weight. And that's just the physical effects that you could see, not to mention all of the destruction it's doing to someone's body. So when you're talking about meth addiction, how important is early intervention? And what are the signs that friends and family should look for? I mean, Tanya mentioned one of them, but let's talk about that.
Well, the whole concept of early intervention is called prevention. I mean, that's where that starts. In my field, I'm not on the prevention side of the field. I'm on the intervention side. But in terms of that, in a general way, and this is pretty common, very common, is that people wait too long to take steps to get involved. You see symptoms like what we've been talking about, but parents do or whatever. They talk themselves out of it, or they redefine it as something else. And so the process gets way down the line. And even when I do when I get calls from people, about 1 out of 20 or 25, 23 maybe, 1 out of 23 people actually do something. So they call and they go, it's terrible, it's terrible, it's terrible, and they're crying on the phone, it's terrible. And then I say, wow, it sounds really terrible, let's do something. And then they say, it's not that bad, it's not that bad, and then they don't do anything. So, there's a lot of reasons why people wait, but interventions are very effective, and the earlier the better. Why? What other potentially life-threatening condition would you wait? I mean, my daughter here has a tumor growing out of her shoulder, but we're going to wait till it gets a little bit bigger before we try to send her to the Mayo Clinic or something like that. See, addiction in general, and meth for sure, is the only issue that people do that with. We're going to wait, and the way that I explain it to families is, like, let's say we're all one family here, and she's the addict. This family wants to go. This family's like we're on a bus going to a healthy place. Okay, why would we make the addict in charge of driving the bus? I mean, but with addiction we do that. They have plans to figure this out and stuff, and so I think that the earlier the better, obviously, in any way that you can intervene, because the big picture, the small picture is, how can we get past the latest crisis that the addict has started? How can we smooth over? How can we put out the latest fire? The big picture is, there's an intervention coming anyway. And when that intervention comes, we don't have anything to say anymore, because death has the final say, or the judge has the final say, or else they don't even care what we have to say. So why don't we, instead of wringing our hands and wait until hoping that the person hits bottom before they die, why don't we move up bottom and do our intervention first and prevent that other one, because at this point the person is not so far down the road that they can't get a pretty good bounce. You got a really good bounce. I mean, she's been sober for what, 22 years. 22 years. Okay. And so she could have continued in her addiction for those 22 years and woke up and got help a week ago. Well, you wouldn't be looking at this at that point, you see. She got a really good bounce. So the earlier you get involved and try to intervene, the better the bounce is.
And I would imagine, too, we have to let families know that, they may feel shame about this, but you need to get past that because it's about the person who you love. It's about their life. It's about your family's life as well.
Families need to do and say and get involved in a way that 6 months from now or a year from now, they're not going to wish they could have done. If you're gonna wish you could have done something, do it.
So Tanya, you 22 years in recovery, and the recovery process never ends. Does it keep going?
Yes,
all these years?
that's absolutely true. I think one of the biggest pieces is that, in the message tonight is that we say recovery does happen. People do get better, but you can't do it by yourself.
So how do you help meth addicts deal with this recovery process? It's certainly not easy, as you know.
No, it's not easy. And I remember the first year being pretty difficult for me, and that's not to say that the years that followed were nothing. But that first year was really tough, and I think that part of the reason that it's that way is because of so much change that has to happen in your lifestyle, especially with meth. Meth took over everything, and it was my entire lifestyle, and so I think it's such a struggle to hear from the counselors and the people that are there to help us that we have to have new friends and we have to have new playmates and we have to have new places to hang out, and I can't go where I used to. And one of the things about me getting sober at 22 years old was, what am I going to do to have fun now? I don't know how to do anything if drugs and alcohol aren't involved. So those pieces are really difficult, and I think that the biggest part for that is to really stress how important the support is, wherever that support comes from, whether that's through a treatment counselor, whether it's in a support group, whether it's attaching to other people that are in recovery that have had success for quite some time so they can share the solutions back with us. It's not easy, but I really want people to hear tonight the message that it's doable. It can be done, and I'm living proof of that.
Yeah, and where can people in Denver go if they want help?
There's on the back page of the intervention program, there's some information there people can access to use to try to find out more information. And of course, certainly people can go to the Advocates for Recovery website at www.advocatesforrecovery.org, and we have a phone number and an email address, and use those things. Reach out for help and ask, because the part we know is that we can't do it alone.
Okay. Attorney General Suthers, we heard a lot about the meth problem several years ago, and now we're hearing about a resurgence today. So what concerns you the most about the meth situation today, 2012?
Well, as I indicated, there's only so much that law enforcement can do to impact the supply. Our constant effort has to be to deal with the demand side. And there's some disconcerting things going on in Colorado, in my opinion. We've embraced medical marijuana, and on November 6th, the voters are being asked to embrace legalization of marijuana on a state level. We know from 35 years of research that for young people, the normalization of marijuana, the lowering of the perception of risk of marijuana, causes their use of that to increase. And we also know that for people under 18 who smoke marijuana, 1 in 4 of them will become serious drug addicts. And I fear that we are going to create a market of young people looking, if you will, and being very vulnerable to the temptations to move into another drug area. And trust me, the dealers are going to be trying to impact these young people and get them to move from marijuana to methamphetamine. So there's just absolutely no let-up in this effort that the Meth Projects had to educate these young people about just how dangerous this drug is.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to be concerned about.
Jeff, I saw you shaking your head. We talked about legalization of marijuana.
Oh, man. All right, so I don't know if you're an addict or not, but let's pretend you're not, okay? And after the meeting,
Notice he didn't pick me to not be.
after the meeting tonight, you could go to some restaurant and you and your wife could have a couple of drinks, not for the purpose of being intoxicated. Do you understand that? Not for the purpose of being intoxicated. The purpose of pot is to be intoxicated. People don't sit around smoking a joint at the end of the day and talk about how great school was that day. It just doesn't happen. They sit around smoking a joint and watch the Three Stooges and listen to Black Sabbath, you know, I mean, that's what I did. But anyway, the point is, even with medical marijuana, you guys, you are impaired, okay? So now you have come out and said, I need medical marijuana. So that's fine, but then I think we should restrict your driving privileges too, because we don't let other people who are impaired. Sorry, I'm off on pot, you know, but the connection between this is a gateway drug to other things and in people's attitudes and it being permissible and whatever, you know, getting high is getting high.
Right. And we were chatting before the show too. Almost every meth user who you ask will tell you that they've smoked marijuana. Just, you know, food for thought.
Including me, Will.
Including Tanya.
Yeah, that was one of the alcohol and marijuana were the beginning, and then I graduated to meth use.
Kent, we heard Jeff say earlier that the true early intervention is prevention, and that's what you guys are doing with your campaign with the Colorado Meth Project. So what changes have you seen over the course of this campaign? How are things going?
Well, so far, I think we've seen some great changes, and the mayor obviously referenced part of it. The first step here is really you got to change attitudes, and this is where some of these normative behavior issues with marijuana and others continue to put this as an issue that we're going to have to continue to message against. But you see, you know, from changing attitudes, we've seen that in the first couple of years. In 2011, our last measurement, we saw 88% of teens see great risk in using meth once or twice. That's up over 9 points from the benchmark before we started this campaign. So that's real positive indicators in terms of attitude shift before you change behavior. 82% now say that their friends would give them a hard time if they were to think about using the drug. That's a positive influencer in terms of how friends influence others. That's up 6 points since we started. So there were some good attitudinal shifts, and now to hear the news that what's changed in Denver Public Schools in this community in terms of a drop in teen meth use from above the state average to below it is really important and a good step in the right direction. But absolutely, we have to continue to be vigilant given the dynamics of the supply that's out there. And I can certainly tell you that we're not alone in being part of the solution here, and a lot of you all in this audience in one way or another are part of that solution. I can tell you we have folks here that are financial supporters. This is a privately funded, this is not a government funded organization. We're a privately funded nonprofit organization. People help to make the support here in Colorado, make this program go. And from foundations, individuals, corporations, our media partners, all are part of that effort. We wouldn't be able to do our outreach without the help of community partners, community organizations that are kind of our boots on the ground that help make the campaign extend its reach. In addition to that, we have a number of volunteers that are here tonight. If you've seen the young ladies at the front door are from our Teen Advisory Council, who have the Ask shirts on. So we have a teen council here that's taking action and doing community service projects in their schools and communities across the state. We also have a number of volunteers, many of which are either in recovery themselves or are part of families that have been touched by meth abuse and are here to help spread the message and really, in many cases, give back to the community that either they felt they took from or their family had an impact on. And so that's a really powerful statement of how we keep getting this message out across the state, again, given the fact that we've got a 300% increase of the availability of the drug and putting our teens at risk as a result.
Scary statistics for sure. And you mentioned our audience, all of you have in some way or another been touched by meth. And so in a moment here, we're going to actually open up this discussion. And we want to invite you guys to come up to those mics right there and talk to our panel. Either share your story, ask a question, whatever it is you want to do. Before we get to opening it up to the general audience, we have 3 audience members who are going to tell you their personal stories, beginning with Cindy. So Cindy, if you could come up to the mic. Let's hear it for Cindy.
Thank you for having me. I'm here tonight because my youngest son, his name is Mitchell McKay Gray, and a twin. He became addicted to methamphetamine at age 17. He became completely and quickly addicted to the drug. Our family probably didn't do enough and intervene early enough, didn't realize there wasn't a lot of information out there about methamphetamine at the time. You know, we really didn't know what to do. Actually even emailed your show, but I could never get him to go on that. You know, it is just one crisis after another when someone is on meth. You know, we watched him, the long-term use or results of meth use are definitely psychosis, paranoia, you know, schizophrenia. We watched that. We watched my son, I watched him become that. You know, he spent many times in jail. He did go to rehab several times. And ultimately, on the 4th of July in 2007, you know, he took his own life by hanging. I became involved. Shortly after that, I saw an organization in the community where I live that was a meth prevention organization, and 2 local business people had started the organization after they found out from law enforcement in our town how bad the meth problem was. And these guys didn't even know anything about meth, and they took it upon themselves to start this organization in Loveland, and you know, went into schools, educating kids, educating our community about what meth is, what meth does. And so I emailed them and became involved with that organization. And you know, it's been 5 years, and I'm now the executive director. But I can't thank the Colorado Meth Project enough, because when I first started speaking about meth to these kids, I would ask them, you know, how many kids have heard about meth and know what it is? And there were very few hands that were raised. And, you know, if they were raised, it was probably because they had personal experience in their own families because of that. But now when I go and talk to the students in my area, and because of the Colorado Meth Project, you know, and what they've done in Colorado, these kids know, you know, most of them know, but we can't stop. Just like you said, you know, there's new kids coming every year. You know, they're getting older every year, so we have to continue to tell them, you know, and to prevent, because after somebody's addicted, it's extremely, extremely, extremely hard to get somebody off of meth, as I know.
You can attest to the fact, too, that it's so powerful. A family can't fight it alone either. They need help.
Right, and we have a big family. I mean, my ex-husband and I have 5 kids. My oldest son, you know, Mitch was the youngest, so he had 2 big brothers out there. You know, I mean, we tried everything. You know, we tried everything there is to try to get Mitch off of meth, but that drug just owned him. It owned him. You know, Mitch, things happened to Mitch that are unspeakable.
How old was Mitch when he died?
He had just turned 23 years old.
So young. I bet he looked older, too, from...
You know, he did when he started meth. You know, he looked, I would say when he was 18, 19, that's when, you know, he was real thin. But after that, he really didn't. So you can't always judge that. You know, he really didn't look like that, you know, when he died. He had grown. He was 6 foot. Was 185 pounds, you know, but... You know, that regardless, you know, he was an IV drug user. He turned to the needle to get high because he was so addicted, you know. And, you know, watching his mind go was something no one should ever watch their child go through, ever.
Real sorry about Mitch, but Cindy, thanks for what you're doing now, the work you're doing. Thanks for sharing your story.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. We're going to hear from Justin now. Justin's going to share his story over here.
Hi, everybody. I'm really glad to be here. My name is Justin. I'm a person in long-term recovery from meth addiction. 11 days ago, I celebrated 5 years meth-free. You know, my journey to addiction started at the age of 14. I started using meth when I was 14 years old. And, you know, I've heard it said tonight, you know, the first hit, I was hooked instantly, you know. My journey to recovery started at the age of 29, so I used meth for 15 years. Pretty much every opportunity that I could. Meth has gotten me 4 felonies, a DOC number. You know, I was distanced from my family, my friends. I was doing pretty much anything I had to do to support my habit, and for those 15 years. And at the bottom point of my addiction, I tried to kill myself. And that was the point where I decided to go ask for help, and I did. And I've been clean ever since. I'm really involved with AFR. I'm a recovery coach with AFR. I'm involved with the Colorado Meth Project. I volunteer for them as well. And I actually work at the rehab that I got sober in, so that's pretty cool too. So
That's great.
yeah,
How are these 5 years going for you? How's it been? What was the hardest part?
the first year.
First year. That's
Yeah.
what we keep hearing.
The first year was pretty tough.
Every day. Do you still think about it?
You know, not. I think about it sometimes, but I keep myself pretty busy. So
Yeah, that's
yeah.
good.
Yeah.
That's good. And do you remember all of that 15 years that you were
Absolutely.
using?
I'll never forget it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What would be your number one thing that you'd tell a young person watching this?
You know, I would just tell my story and just tell them that this drug is nothing but bad news and it leads you to very dark and bad places.